They can be placed on the ballot by citizens or by state lawmakers. A proposition passes and becomes law if it receives more than 50% yes votes. There are 5 initiatives put on the ballot by citizens who seek to make changes in either state laws or in the Constitution. There are 2 propositions placed by the state legislature. One is a referendum, which means it asks that a law that has already been passed by the legislature and signed by the governor be approved by the voters. Since we have 7 propositions, we will take questions and comments when we finish as time allows. If you need more information to answer your questions after this Zoom meeting, please go to your state booklet, which you received in the mail. It looks like this. Everyone received it. And in the booklet, there's a quick reference guide in the front that has summaries of the propositions. And it also has more detailed information on each proposition. There are also some candidate statements in there, but those are on state elections. And at the bottom of page 3, there is a website put on there by the Fair Political Practice Commission. And if you're interested in the money contributions to ballot propositions and to candidates, they on their website, they put on the top 10 contributors. It also includes voter websites and summaries of the proposition are in our easy voter guides that the League of Women Voters puts out. Now, the League has positions on some ballot propositions, but we will not state them during this presentation. You can go to our organization's website for this. So please do that. So we will start with Proposition 1 and Sandy Warren.
Okay. Proposition 1. This is a constitutional amendment, and it would change the California Constitution, which includes existing rights to reproductive freedom. It would keep reproductive medical decisions with individuals and their healthcare providers. Opponents say it is not needed, excuse me, and fear abortion seekers from outside California will swamp California resources. Supporters say this should be part of the state constitution. The supporters include the California Medical Association, Planned Parenthood of California, the California Nurses Association, and others. Opponents are various individuals and the California Catholic Conference. So that's Proposition 1. Then we'll go to Proposition 26. This is one of the 2 propositions that deals with gambling in California, and it deals with gambling in Indian tribal casinos. It's a constitutional amendment and statute, and it would allow roulette and dice games plus sports betting in American Indian-owned casinos. 4 private racetracks would also be allowed to offer sports betting on their premises, and they would have to pay 10% of the net bets made at the track to the state. The revenue from racetrack sports betting would go 70% to the general fund, 15% to gambling enforcement costs, and the remainder for gambling addiction and mental health programs. Supporters include several Indian groups, the NAACP, and the Lieutenant Governor, Elena Kounalakis, and California State Treasurer Fiona Ma. The opponents are the California Black Chamber of Commerce, the California Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, the Fresno Police Association, and others. That's Prop 26.
Okay, Proposition 27. This is an initiative, and it would allow online and mobile sports betting outside tribal lands. The question is, should California allow online and mobile sports betting for people 21 years of age or older? The background on this is the California Constitution and California statutes define what types of gambling are allowed in the state. It is now legal to play the California lottery, to bet on a horse race, wager on card games in certain card rooms, and gamble in American Indian-owned casinos. And currently, betting on sports events is not legal in California. But a 2018 US Supreme Court decision struck down the federal law that banned sports betting, and since then, about 35 states have legalized it. So now it is up to each state to legalize it or not. Now, Proposition 27 would allow adults 21 or older to bet on adult sports events online. It allows tribes to offer online sports betting under the tribe's name. It allows gaming companies to offer online sports betting under a marketing agreement with a tribe. It creates a new division within the state's Justice Department to regulate online sports betting. It imposes a 10% tax on all tribes or companies offering sports betting. Now, revenue from this 10% tax and licensing fees would go into a new fund. 85% of that 10% tax revenue would be used for homelessness and related mental health programs. 15% would go to American Indian tribes not involved in sports betting. None of the revenue would be included in the state's general fund that allocates money to programs such as public education. Now, both Propositions 26 and 27, they both legalize sports betting. So if both pass, it is possible that both will take effect. If a court finds that parts are in conflict, the one that received the most yes votes will be law. Now, the fiscal effects depends on variables. One is the number of entities that offer online betting. Another variable is if there is renegotiation of agreements between the tribes and the state. Also a variable is the number of people engaged in online betting. The potential for increases in state revenue are up to 500 million each year. Increased regulatory costs estimated at 10 million plus each year. Some or all costs would be offset by payments paid to the state for regulation. Now, the supporters say Prop 27 will provide revenue to support programs that alleviate homelessness, mental health, and addiction. It will benefit every California tribe, especially rural and economically disadvantaged tribes which don't own big casinos. And it requires state-of-the-art technology to ensure that minors don't place bets. Some of the supporters are the Pomo Indians of California, the Santa Rosa Yokut tribe, San Diego and Sacramento regional task forces on homelessness, the mayors of Sacramento, Oakland, Fresno, and Long Beach, and Major League Baseball. Now, the opponents, on the other hand, say that Proposition 27 is a deceptive measure promoted by out-of-state gambling companies to legalize online sports gambling in California. They say that online gambling is not a solution to homelessness and other social ills and will open more people to gambling addictions. They say it will not generate jobs or create investments because operators will retain most of the profits. 90% of the profits would go to the tribes and or gambling companies. 10% of the profits would go to the state. Those opponents, the groups opposing this are the California Nations Indian Gaming Association, the Tribal Alliance of Sovereign Indian Nations, the League of California Cities, the California Democratic Party, the California Republican Party, and the California Teachers Association. That is Proposition 27. Proposition 28. This provides additional funding for arts and music education in public schools. And the question is, should the state provide specific funding for arts and music education, an amount higher than the existing constitutional minimum amount? The background: because Prop 98 passed in 1988, the California Constitution requires a minimum percentage of the state budget to be spent on kindergarten through 14 education. That would be kindergarten through community college level. This minimum guarantee is calculated annually. There's currently no guaranteed source of annual funding in the state budget for arts and music education in K-12 schools. However, state law requires art and music instruction in grades 1 through 6. Middle school students can take it as an elective, and high school students are required to complete 1 year in one of 3 courses of study, one of which may be arts and music education. The specifics, such as the amount of instruction or when courses are offered, are determined by each local school board. Now, the proposal. Proposition 28 would require the state to provide funding specifically for arts and music education in K-12 public schools. This funding would be in addition to the funding already guaranteed by Proposition 98, passed in 1988. Proposition 28 would require the funding to be at least 1% of the funding received by schools from Proposition 98. To address equity issues, Proposition 28 would allocate more funding to schools serving many low-income students. Schools would be required to report how funding was used to directly benefit students, and school boards would certify that funding was spent on music and arts education and report this publicly. The fiscal effects. Arts and music education would cost $800 million to $1 billion each year. That is less than 0.5% of the state's total general fund. Now, the supporters say arts and music education can improve a student's personal and academic life. They also state that only 1 in 5 schools, that's 20%, have a dedicated teacher for arts and music programs in California. Now, you compare that to New York, where 75% of schools have designated arts and music instructors. They also say that Proposition 28 would increase funding for educational programs without raising taxes. The groups that support this are Californians for Art and Music in Public Schools, California Teachers Association, California State PTA, the Los Angeles Unified School District, and the California Democratic Party. As far as opponents, there's no arguments against Proposition 28 that were submitted, and there's no organized campaign committee. However, there have been numerous newspaper editorials throughout the state, and one of them is the Los Angeles Times editorial, and they criticize this proposition as ballot box budgeting, and that reduces the ability to fund other programs. Ballot box budgeting is when voters make a decision about the state budget directly at the polls by bypassing the legislature through a ballot measure. And they say that this then reduces the ability of the legislature to change the priority of funding when you have a loss of revenue in a given year. And now it is Proposition 29 for Maryland.
Hello. So Prop 29 may sound familiar. It's the third time there's been a proposition on the ballot having to do with dialysis clinics. So Prop 29 requires on-site licensed medical professionals at kidney dialysis clinics and establishes other state requirements. So the question put to you, the voters, is, should outpatient dialysis clinics be required to have a physician, nurse practitioner, or a physician assistant on site at all hours when patients are being treated? And should the clinics be required to provide various clinic-related information to patients and the state? So the background is that kidney dialysis is provided by 650 clinics in California, treating about 80,000 patients each month. Two private for-profit companies, DaVita Incorporated, which is a US company, and Fresenius Medical Care, a German company. These two companies own and operate about 75% of the clinics. A variety of nonprofits and for-profits own or operate the rest, the other 25%. The treatment is paid for by Medicare, Medi-Cal, and private insurance, or some combination of those. To serve more patients, clinics often operate 6 days a week. Federal law requires clinics to report infections related to treatment, and all patients have their physicians whom they must see once per month in order to continue dialysis. All clinics have a medical director who is a physician. Prop 20, the proposal is, Prop 29 would require that a licensed physician, nurse practitioner, or physician assistant be on site at all times when dialysis is being performed. Telehealth may be used for 1 year if no such person is available. So it gives them some time to adjust. It also would require that clinics report to patients the name of any physician with more than 5% interest in the clinic. It requires that clinics do not discriminate among patients based on source of payment. It would require that clinics report information about dialysis-related infections among their patients, and the clinics would have to obtain permission from the state to close or reduce hours. The fiscal effects. There are fiscal implications for both the clinics and the state and local governments. Clinics would probably have to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars more annually for staff salaries if Prop 29 passes. And another fiscal effect could be that state and local governments might have to pay tens of millions of dollars more annually if clinics close and patients must go to more expensive facilities such as emergency rooms. Supporters say requiring a physician, nurse practitioner, or physician assistant to be present during a dangerous procedure like dialysis is common sense and a matter of patient safety. They also say that dialysis clinics currently face fewer inspections than other health facilities, and deficiencies are often uncovered. And they say the big corporations that operate dialysis clinics can easily make required staffing changes and still profit hundreds of millions of dollars a year. The supporters are the SEIU, United Healthcare Workers West, and the money contributed in support is really nothing of note, but the SEIU spent $8 million to qualify Prop 29 for the ballot. Opponents say clinics already use specially trained technicians, and every patient is under the care of their own kidney doctor, so more oversight is unnecessary. Opponents say that this would take thousands of medical staff, of skilled medical staff from hospitals where they are needed and place them in administrative jobs. They also say that on-site administrators who do not provide patient care would cost hundreds of millions of dollars every year, forcing clinics to reduce hours or close. The opponents of Prop 29 are the American Nurses Association, the California Medical Association, the Republican Party of California, the California Chamber of Commerce, and the president of the AMA, the American Medical Association. Money contributed in opposition to Prop 29 is around $86 million, 52 million of that from DaVita and 27 million from Fresenius. There's really no newspaper support for Prop 29, and many newspaper editorials have been against it. So that's Prop 29. Prop 30. This also is an initiative statute, so if it passes, it would become law. And Prop 30 provides funding for programs to reduce air pollution and prevent wildfires by increasing tax on personal income over $2 million. So the question put to you, the voters, is, should the tax rate on personal income above 2 million? So that means this extra percentage of tax would be applied above on the income above 2 million, not up to 2 million, but above 2 million. So should the tax rate on personal income above $2 million be increased by 1.75%, and the revenue be dedicated to zero emission vehicle subsidies, zero emission vehicle infrastructure, such as electric charging stations, and wildfire suppression and prevention programs. The background is that, as we know, California is experiencing severe drought, increasingly devastating wildfires, and poor air quality. Gas-powered cars and wildfire smoke are the two largest sources of greenhouse gas emissions in the state. The state has already passed laws to reduce GHGs, greenhouse gas emissions, that include requiring that ride-sharing companies like Lyft and Uber have 90% of their drivers using ZEVs, zero-emission vehicles, by 2030. ZEVs are expensive, and there aren't sufficient charging stations. CAL FIRE is responsible for fire suppression and, with other state agencies, prevention. It's facing rising costs as fires become more catastrophic. The proposal. Prop 30 would increase the annual income tax by 1.75% on individual incomes above $2 million. The funds would be allocated as follows. 45% of the funds would promote the purchase of ZEVs, including subsidies and rebates for passenger vehicles, cars, and medium and heavy duty vehicles like trucks and buses. 35% of the funds would increase the availability of ZEV infrastructure, including electric charging stations close to single and multifamily dwellings. Included is a stipulation that at least half must benefit low-income and disadvantaged communities. 20% of the funds would help fund wildfire suppression and prevention. It requires that CAL FIRE make hiring and training additional firefighters a top priority. The tax increase would end on January 1st, 2043, 20 years from now, or earlier if there are 3 consecutive calendar years in which statewide greenhouse gas emissions are 80% below 1990 levels. So the state has already set 1990 levels as a goal. The fiscal effects. Prop 30 would generate 3.5 to 5 billion in revenue most years. The reason for the spread is that high income often changes quickly due to changes in the economy and stock market. So it's hard to really estimate very closely. But that would amount to $2.8 to $4 billion annually in ZEV funding and $700 million to $1 billion for wildfire response. The measure could help decrease state and local costs for wildfire suppression and prevention, though the size of the fiscal effects is hard to predict. Supporters of Prop 30 say that existing programs are insufficient to address California's poor air quality. They say that Prop 30 would make ZEVs more affordable and would create well-paying green jobs. That Prop 30 would fund critically needed programs to prevent catastrophic wildfires and protect homes. And supporters say that there is strict accountability that would ensure that these funds are spent as intended. Supporters are the California State Firefighters, the American Lung Association, the Coalition for Clean Air, California Environmental Voters, Natural Resources Defense Council, and Union of Concerned Scientists. Money contributed in support of Prop 30 is around $37 million, with Lyft contributing $15 million of that. Opponents of Prop 30 say that California is already spending more than $50 billion for a multi-year climate investment, including $10 billion for ZEVs. They say that there's no guarantee that Prop 30 will make ZEVs affordable for most California families. Opponents say that Prop 30 locks money from income taxes, normally a major source of school funding, into special interests. And opponents say that Prop 30 is Lyft's attempt to get taxpayers to help foot the bill for the requirement to increase the number of ZEVs used. Opponents include the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, the California Small Business Association, United Latinos Action, California Teachers Association, Jack O'Connell, the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, retired, Governor Gavin Newsom, and the Republican Party of California. A couple of comments. The California Teachers Association is opposed to this because it gets back to what Dottie said about Prop 98 that was passed in 1988 that requires a certain percentage of the budget to go to K through 14 education. And Prop 30 doesn't allow for that. This is money that would be carved out separately. It wouldn't go into the general fund. Governor Newsom is an opponent because he says that there's $10 billion already allocated for EVs and their infrastructure, and he feels that this is a special interest carve out for Lyft. The money spent or money contributed in opposition to Prop 30 is around 11.5 million, mostly coming from wealthy individuals. That's Prop 30, and Dottie will do Prop 31.
Okay, Proposition 31 is a referendum on a 2020 law that would prohibit the retail sale of certain flavored tobacco products. Now, a referendum requires voter approval to become law. So the question is, should this law passed by the California legislature and signed by the governor be approved by the voters? The California state legislature passed this law in 2020. The law as written bans the sale of all flavored tobacco products. The prohibition includes pods for vape pens, menthol cigarettes, and chewing tobacco. The ban applies to in-store purchases and vending machines. The law did not go into effect because a petition to demand a referendum on the law qualified for this ballot. The law does not go into effect until the voters decide to approve it. So that means a yes vote is to approve the law, which would ban the sale of flavored tobacco products so that it can be enforced as law. A no vote is to repeal the contested legislation, thus keeping the sale of flavored tobacco legal in the state. The fiscal effects. Prop 31 likely would reduce state tobacco tax revenues by an amount ranging from tens of millions of dollars to about 100 million annually. The size of this revenue loss depends on how consumers respond. They may buy other forms of legal tobacco, therefore revenue will not decrease much. Now, the supporters say Proposition 31 will help decrease smoking rates, especially among youth. They say that it protects our youth by ending the sale of candy-flavored tobacco products that lures them into lifelong addiction to nicotine. And the supporters also say that more than 2 million middle and high school students now use e-cigarettes. 4 out of 5 kids who have used tobacco who are started with a flavored product. The supporters are California Teachers Association, California Medical Association, American Academy of Pediatrics, American Heart Association, American Cancer Society, and Governor Gavin Newsom. The opponents say that Prop 31 is simply prohibition of tobacco sales to adults. They say it will drive more tobacco sales into the illegal market that already exists. And the opponents say that the state will lose valuable revenue that supports healthcare. Groups that are opposed to this are the California Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, the California Asian Chamber of Commerce, California Taxpayer Protection Committee, and the Central Valley Business Federation. Contributions have equal to 21 million, and 2 tobacco companies, RJ Reynolds contributed 10 million, and Philip Morris contributed 10 million. And that concludes our propositions for tonight, all 7 propositions. So if there are any questions, we can start with those.
Well, I'd like to thank the league members of the local League of Women Voters. I know you've been making these presentations all month long and really appreciate you showing up this evening. And if you have any questions, please use the reaction button to raise your hand so that we may call on you. Thank you.
Patricia, you're muted.
Dana, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, there's just so much here. And the one that, of course, is on my mind now is the 31, the flavored tobacco. Why do you think the Spanish and what was the other, the Asian Association, why were they opposed to this? Any?
I don't have any particular research on that. I honestly don't know why they're opposed to it.
It's curious. And also I'm wondering on the gambling ones, I think I saw some ads where the more tribes that don't have the power with the current system, because they're smaller, are favoring the 27. That's the impression I got. Do you have any more? I'm just thinking, since we're NAACP looking at marginalized communities and seeing how these would impact them would be important.
Well, you know, the difference between 26 and 27 is 26 allows the sports betting only at the casinos, whereas 27 allows online sports betting. And then also 27 provides, it said 15% of that 10% tax. 15% would go to American Indian tribes not involved in sports betting, the ones that are not big enough to have casinos.
Yeah.
So that's why they are more in support of 27, because they get some revenue off of it. Whereas
Mhm.
26 does not provide that revenue for those tribes. What was your other question about it?
I think that was it. Yeah.
But they're very split on different tribes support one and not the other. And it's very split. And you can see that in the ads that are coming out.
Mhm.
So they're very split. But I
So, well,
think
the tribes that already have the casinos, that was my impression.
they want 26.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And the ones that are that don't own the casinos, they would prefer 27 because they get some revenue off of that one.
Mhm.
Thank you. Assistant Secretary Whitley.
I just wanted to say thank you for the presentation tonight. It came at a perfect time for me. I was just getting ready to sit down and go over my ballot. So thank you again for having the presentation tonight.
Does anybody else have any questions? Please raise your hand either on the screen or using the reactions feature to raise your hand. That was such a thorough presentation. I'm not surprised there was a lot of questions.
Elaine, unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. Unfortunately, I got on late, so I didn't hear your discussion of 28 and 29. And I'm particularly interested in 28.
There was no discussion. She just read it.
What? I didn't hear you.
I'm
28, I just wondered like who was for it and who's against it?
Okay. 28, the supporters are California Teachers Association, California State PTA, the Los Angeles Unified School District, the California Democratic Party are supporters of 28. There's no organized campaign committee opposing it, but I don't know if you were on
Okay.
when I mentioned that the only criticism of it is coming from newspapers, and they are running editorials against it. And they do not like the ballot box budgeting aspect of it. Ballot box budgeting is when voters make a decision about state budgets directly at the polls, because and then it bypasses the legislature through this ballot measure, because there will 28 and the other one is 30. They both specify revenue that will be for a very particular item topic. Like for 28 is for arts and music education, and the legislature can't touch it. They can't change that. So it's locked in. So what they're saying is it reduces the ability of the legislature to reallocate funds and say a loss of revenue a year. If it's the revenues are down and they have to say, oh, we have to reallocate. These two propositions, 28 and 30, lock it in and they cannot touch it. So that's what they have against it. It's ballot box budgeting.
Thank you.
And also that it would set a precedent, I think, at the polls.
Well, this has been done before, ballot box budgeting. I mean, if it passes, if a particular
How common is it?
Well, how come what?
How common is this?
Well, how common is there have been these types before. This is not new. It's not new. That's why I think the newspapers are writing editorials about it, because saying that this is the negative side of it. Because it's been done before and it locks the legislature in. I listened to on a Zoom, John Laird presented the propositions, and he's a state senator, and he didn't really give his opinion when he was presenting them, but I would think, being a legislator that he would not be pleased with this type of legislation because it locks them in.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Great question. Bob?
Yes, I'd like to know what the league's position is on each one of the propositions and why.
Well, when we present the propositions, we do not present the league position on it because we like to present it in a neutral way. Like we give both the supporters and the opponents arguments, and then you make up your own mind. But if you want to know the league's position, you can go on our website and it's
Yes,
there.
I
But when we
already did
present
that.
these, when we present these to the public, we are not supposed to, say which ones the league supports or not.
Okay, but everything that we've gone over tonight is pretty much what's already in the pamphlet that I've already gone through.
Yeah.
So I was expecting a little more. I wanted you to sway me one way or the other.
Well,
Okay.
if you want to know the league position, you can get it on the league website. You can. It's a state.
Yeah, I
it's the state
did
league
look
website.
at that. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I'd
You can get
invite,
it there.
I'd invite any of the members of the League of Women Voters to drop that link into the chat if you have it available. We'll go to Lizanne, and then we've got a question in the chat that I'll read. Lizanne?
Yes, I'd like advice on finding good information on the justices. Like, how do you find out, the different judges? Why do you find information out about them? I don't think they're in the booklet, like information.
No, they're not. No.
So how do you determine who is a good person to vote for?
You'd have to go on a state, California state website to find information on the judges, because the league doesn't have the information, and we haven't published anything on them. And so the only way you could get it, the only place you can get it is from the California state website,
Okay.
California government.
Yeah, now that we
Website.
know, we increasingly know how important judges are.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
just would like to, okay, so I'll look on the California state. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Delise Weir, I'd like to invite you to unmute yourself and ask your questions, or I can do them for you. You have entered some questions into the chat.
Okay, yeah, I'm just between the two ballot measures. Has anybody done any analysis that kind of identifies what overall holistically supports Native American tribes in California better? And the other question is, why did Gavin Newsom oppose Prop 30? Can you expand on his logic for that? I heard the part about a carve out for Lyft, but is there more? Thank you.
And that would be Marilyn. Are you on here somewhere? Marilyn can answer the Prop 31. I don't know. I don't know what happened. to
You're
Marilyn.
also muted, Marilyn.
She may be having some technical difficulties.
You're muted.
Okay, I know. I couldn't even see the screen.
Oh.
Governor Newsom is opposed to Prop 30 for two reasons. One is because he feels that the state has already passed a big package of 30 or 50 or $10 billion already allocated for EVs and their infrastructure. So he feels that the state has already addressed that. And he also sees this as a special interest carve out for Lyft and Uber, because the state has a requirement for them to go to ZEV vehicles by 2030, 90% of their drivers. And so he's against this because he feels like it's a benefit to very specific companies.
And what was the specific question about the tribal question on 26 and 27? I think it was Denise.
It
that had
was,
a question.
do either, has there been an analysis which of those may benefit tribes the most?
Well, Proposition 26 benefits the tribes that own the casinos because they can do the sports betting in the casino. So those tribes will benefit very much. That's a lot of cash coming in there.
Do we know how
20
many they are in proportion to the non-casino owning?
Oh, I'm sure that there's, I don't know exactly, but I'm guessing there's many more casino owners. I think there's, whereas 27 would help the smaller tribes that don't own the casinos, because they have put in a special carve out for them, 15%, not 15% of the total, but 15% of the 10% tax on the tribes would go toward those tribes not involved in sports betting. So, and the 27 would also allow the gambling companies, and these are mostly out-of-state gambling companies, to come in and for the online sports betting, they'd be involved in that. But they have to hook up with a particular tribe to do that. They can't come in and do it on their own. They have to have an agreement with a particular tribe that has a casino, that they would do it through them. It's like a marketing agreement, I guess, or some type of agreement. And so they would, those gambling companies, the private gambling companies, would end up getting a lot of money out of this. So that would be under 27. So I don't know. I have not seen any. I haven't seen any research that tells me exactly which one, would benefit the poor tribes, or well, 27 would benefit the poor tribes, but which one would be more advantageous? I don't know. I haven't seen any research on that. That's just myself looking at it.
Thank you.
Did you have a comment to add to that, Marilyn?
Yeah, I would, there's an estimate that out of Prop 27, which is the online gambling one, the estimate of about how much money would go to housing per year is around $500 million. So to your question about how much would that help tribes that really need it, there's really no answer, but $500 million a year towards housing in the entire state of California is not a lot of money, really. I mean, if you look at the need for housing in the Los Angeles area or in the Bay Area, that could eat up probably far more than 500 million. So if the question is specifically, what will the benefit be to the tribes that don't have casinos, it's hard to say how that 500 million will be spread and how far it'll get.
Thank you. G. Williams?
Yeah, I have a comment regarding Prop 30, which is designed to support the ZEV vehicles, and then a portion of it, 35%, is supposed to go for charging stations that are located in low-income households and communities. And is there a place where that low income housing and communities fleshed out more? Because the booklet says the money will be spent on projects that benefit people who live in or near heavily polluted and or low income communities, but that could be anywhere. It's very vague as far as where that 35%, which, as I understood you explain, would be locked in. And so I'm really curious about where they're talking about. And furthermore, as far as I can tell, this particular proposition, you know, low income families are not buying electric vehicles right now. So
As we all know, electric vehicles are expensive, and you're right, low income families are not buying them. They can't afford them. Part of Prop 30 is to try and subsidize the purchase of ZEVs for lower income families, and then to provide infrastructure in areas where lower income families live. In terms of your question, how do the administrators of this bill, should it pass, or this proposition, should it pass? Well, they have demographics, information. They have information in urban areas and in the whole state as to property tax rates and low income areas versus not. So I think they'd be able to sort that out. But there are other questions regarding Prop 30 as far as in the details, like if you've got electric charging stations near a multi-family complex, how do you ensure that they're used fairly? How do you ensure that somebody doesn't plug in and stay plugged in for 24 hours and someone else has a need to plug in and get to work? So there's a lot of detail that I don't know if Prop 30 actually addresses all of that detail, but if it goes into effect, then the legislature is going to have to address that detail.
Thank you. Dana?
Yeah, just a comment. My understanding of the charging stations is that it's really tricky because some cars use one type of EV charging station, other cars, and then, things get outdated and there's all kinds of wars going on with the charging station. So it's pretty tricky. And also I was thinking about the gambling. I mean, you could vote no on both of the gambling ones, right? And then what are we left with? They still would have online gambling with the casinos? No. There
No.
would not be any online gambling if we voted no on both. Okay.
Exactly. This is, yeah. Well, the online gambling the online one is Proposition 27. That's online.
Okay.
What you're voting on in both one is sports betting. The
Sports
proposition
betting.
sports betting. So right now, this is illegal in California. You cannot bet on, and they're talking about college and professional sports. They're not talking, high school. They're talking college and professional.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's sports betting for each proposition, whereas the 26 is at just the casinos, 27 is online. That's the difference.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Okay,
but
thanks.
they're both about sports betting.
Not seeing any further questions, I'll turn it over to President Griffin. Oh, I'm sorry, Elaine.
Thank you. Again, because I was late, I didn't hear your discussion of 29, and I was interested to know who would be opposed to 29.
The opponents are the American Nurses Association, California Medical Association, and they are opposed mostly because they feel that this would take medical staffing out of hospitals where there's already a shortage of staffing. So in order to staff all these dialysis clinics with a doctor, a nurse practitioner, or a physician's assistant, that would make the medical staffing shortage even worse. The Republican Party is against it. I'm not sure what their thinking is. The California Chamber of Commerce and the president of the American Medical Association. And of course, the two big companies that own 75% of the dialysis clinics, they've spent a lot of money in opposition.
Wow,
Thank you.
thank you.
If I could, I posted in chat a link to League of Women Voters California .org, vote with the League. And so if you go to that link, you'll see the League positions. The League doesn't take a position on every proposition. Some of them, they just remain neutral. But on propositions where the League has done studies and has a position, you'll find it there. And then I also put another one up there, californiavotes.org. It's very similar. It's from the League. And there's another one that I'll put up there in a second. It's called ballotpedia.org. And they give you good information about the money that's being contributed in these campaigns for the propositions for and against. So I'll put that up there too.
Thank you.
Well, again, thank you, League of Women Voters, Marilyn, Sandy, and Dottie. And we'll turn it over to President Griffin to whatever's next.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm gonna do exactly what Jane just did, Sandy, Dottie, and Marilyn. Thank you so much for this presentation. It's very helpful, very informative. The only thing that could top
Thank
it
you for having us.
or make it even better would be to know what your positions are, but we will go to your website to find out. So thank you for that. And again, I hope this is not our last event together. I really enjoyed being here with you tonight. If you want to save the information in the chat, if you click on the chat button and click on the 3 dots that's at the bottom of the chat button, it'll bring up a menu and you can save the chat there if you'd like to get those website addresses. Excuse me. Okay, so Jane, thank you for your participation tonight. I appreciate it. And thank you all for being here. I hope this has been helpful.
Thank you.
And I look forward to seeing you all. Take care. And good night.
Get out there and vote. Thank you.
Yes.
Good night.